Welcome, Mary.
Marianne.
So I'm here with Mary Berkery today, and I feel like I want to tell people about our lovely chance meeting, Mary. So I've known Mary for probably about 10 years, I would say. And I knew that Mary was well into horses because I'm a horsey person as well. And I've got horses at home and have trained to bring horses into my coaching work. And I knew this is something that Mary's passionate about. And earlier this year, I was at the airport and bumped into Mary. And Mary was on her way to Glastonbury and actually to meet a woman who I'd bumped into on the ferry about 15 years ago. And this person, Penny, if you're listening, now lives where I grew up in England, and it feels like a strange loop of connection. Oh, feels like a strange loop of connection between us. Um, Apologies. I thought I had my phone on silent anyway. Clearly not. So, welcome, Mary. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because there is much more to you than the horsey woman that I've known for a while. So, over to you, Mary.
Hello, Mariana. Yes, it was just a lovely coincidence at the airport, and we sat and had a coffee and chatted and reconnected. And yes, and I about to go and meet a mutual friend. I'm really, what can I say about myself? It's hard. I think what I'm passionate about is empowerment, personal empowerment, and I think it's something that we need so much in these times of flux. And like Mariana, I work as a life coach, and I also do that in the presence of horses. And I work online like most you other coaches, and bring horses in whenever I possibly can, even if it's a visualization of a horse sometimes. And I've written a book called Saved by a Horse, and I've done a TED talk called Horses as Mirrors, which is the title for this event that Mariana kindly has hosted. And it's just lovely to be here. And I live in the west of Ireland, just for anybody who knows, in the beautiful County Mayo, looking out at the sea as we speak. And over to my right is the wonderful Croagh Mountain, which I have such respect and reverence for. My passion would be looking at what we had on this land before we became, in a sense, Roman Catholic or Methodist Catholic or whatever, that we had something very special, and it's still here on this land, as well as, and horses were very much part of that mythology and wisdom as well. But let me not divert and get back to you, Mariana.
I'm looking in the group live, Mary, and I'm not seeing, even though this is telling me that we are streaming into the group, I'm not actually seeing our conversation within the group. So just forgive me while I foot around to see. Oh no, I can see us there now. Great.
Great.
I love the connection as well, Mary, with you on the west coast of Ireland, and my home is there and my heart is probably west coast of England. So there's that connection because I know you've been spending a lot of time there as well over the last year. Mary, I've got a kind of people maybe joining in because they're wondering why horses. My light's going off here. Why horses in a coaching practice?
Well, horses, first of all, have been on the planet 55 million years, and we're only here a couple of 100,000 years. And because they're prey animals, Mariana, they're genetically wired to read any situation that comes into their yard or field or arena. Are you a wolf about to kill them, or are you part of the herd, basically? So they can read. They have an incredible innate ability to read you and to actually feel what's happening in your body and soul, and reflect that back to you in uncanny ways. Excuse me the noise, but there's a dog behind me rolling in autumn leaves. So there we go. So they can read you, and they can. I'm a little bit distracted now with this dog.
Mary, you told me some interesting facts about horses being able to pick up on your heartbeat.
Yeah, they can actually hear your heartbeat from 4 feet away. They can smell They can smell you from a distance. In fact, recently, one of my horses, she was going berserk in the field. I said, what's happening to her? And on a field much lower, a sheep had broken in. She couldn't see the sheep, but she knew the sheep was there, and she's a lead horse. And it was like, oh my God, what's going on with her name is Emily. What's going on with Emily? She picked up the fact that there was an invader on the property. They can feel the subtle differences in the in weather ahead of when the weather changes. So as a coach, also they have no bias. I have constantly unconscious bias in my sessions, as everybody has. And as we all know as coaches, it's so easy to jump in and say something, and we sometimes have to rein ourselves back not to. Whereas horses, first of all, they don't speak, and they have no unconscious bias. It doesn't matter whether you come in designer gear, in a beautiful car, or you cycle up on a rundown bicycle to have a session. They read you on, they get you on a soul level, they get you on a heart level. And I find them, to be honest, much better mirrors than I can be as a coach. So I love working with them. I just love it. They've taught me so much as well about holding that sort of empty space where it looks like nothing is happening and so much is happening at the same time.
One of the reasons I call this group coaching presence is because I believe that's the big skill that we bring. That's that essence, what we bring as coaches. And it's something about horse presence, as you say, as coaches, we try and learn not to show our unconscious bias. Sometimes it's easier than other times, but we have it. We make a lot of assumptions and all of those things that horses naturally don't do, because they literally read the data that they're given and they make connections from that, the heartbeat, they pick up on if we're feeling anxious, our muscle spasms that we may not even be aware of ourselves. Horses can kind of collect all that data and react instantly to it. I'm actually reminded of very recently, I had one of my little ponies had to have their wolf teeth out. So the vet and the horse dentist were there, sedated the pony, and the dentist just made a move to get something out of her pocket, and he immediately perked up because he thought he was going to get a treat. That very subtle hand movement just had all of these connections.
They're so awake, and they're so
even heavily sedated, they're awake.
They're so awake and so aware and so tuned in, and they haven't lost, unless they've been numbed down or dumbed down with a lot of, the old-fashioned word was breaking a horse. It's now called joining up with the breaking practices. They have kept that innate sort of sense of wildness and presence. And they are just wonderful, mirrors, to use that word again. And also, I love that coaching book by Nancy Klein called Time to Think. My favorite coaching books. I have to learn that. I have to learn always to keep that space open when there's nothing happening and the person is thinking, not to interject. Horses do it naturally. They're just standing, just looking. And meanwhile, this person's is dropping more into their heart, dropping into their body, dropping into their feelings just by being present. It's seen now scientifically, just by being in the presence of a horse, we come in more to heart coherence. High blood pressure can drop. And I knew that I was saying to you earlier, Mariana, when I ran a business and I lived in Dublin, I had a very, very hectic business, and I had I had to be around horses at all times. And I used to go down to Wicklow and just muck out stables just to be near them. And I would go down with conversations going around in my head about what had happened that day with an employee or with a customer. And I'd muck out one or two horse stables, and I'd come back, and I'd notice when I was coming back, those conversations had stopped, because just by being in their presence, I had dropped more out of this busy mind and more into full body presence and into heart connection. And that was, I didn't have a word for it at the time, but that was equine assisted therapy.
Absolutely. I think there's nothing better than sitting in the middle of a field with horses around you. It's a very healing thing to do.
And also what they do, which we've been trained out of, is and you know this, Mariana, if a horse crosses a boundary and moves in another horse's space, they'll just basically tell that horse to back off in no uncertain terms, putting their ears back, showing their teeth, or even letting fly. They'll feed what they need to feel, and then, as we say, they go back to grazing. And we have so many lids on what we need to feel.
Yeah.
And, oh, should I be feeling this? And is it too much? Because we've been taught to be sort of very nice and very compliant, and,
And that's why we have the conversations going blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, when
oh,
we're
it's too
driving
much,
from
and I
Dublin.
shouldn't, and I should, and we're doing all this shoulding on ourselves. They don't have that. So they can mirror back how to be authentic in what we feel, and let it move. Emotion is something moving. Let it move through the body, and then come back to presence, and come back to what's under that emotion that's stuck in us. But that's a whole other topic that we can talk about in another session.
Mary, I know you've written a book about all of this, and I will make sure that people are aware of that book. But there were some stories in the book that really illustrate how horses act as mirrors, and I know that you had one to share.
Well, there's so many. The book is called Saved by a Horse, Stories of Love, Healing, and Human Transformation Through Horses. And there was one, I think it's on page 95. It's called Coaching, if anybody has the book already. It's called Coaching, Equine and Human Assisted Coaching. And it was a businesswoman who came to me, and she had just had become totally overwhelmed with government letters that had been coming for the previous 6 to 9 months. And she had, risen up from the ashes after the Lehman Brothers crash, and she'd lost everything, and she was rising again. And during the Lehman, she'd lost everything, had to pay off debts, had to, go through some personal insolvency stuff. And then all of a sudden, letters, as a neighbor used to say, letters with windows started to arrive again. And she went into total kind of freeze mode and didn't know what to do, and was afraid to open them. And the memories of what had happened and what she'd kind of come through were coming back. And she literally started stuffing the letters into drawers. And it was getting bigger and bigger and more and more. And she ended up taking sleeping tablets to sleep at night, and had said nothing to her husband about it. And decided to come, and she loved horses, and decided to come to me to talk to a horse about it. And I'm there and said, how is the horse going to help a businesswoman open her letters? But that's what you do all the time with horses. And I said, okay, let's bring this. I don't know how to do. I don't know how to face this. And it's getting too big, and it's causing me now sleepless nights and stress. And I'm verging on having even more panic attacks all over again with it. So I said, okay, let's go to the horses. And she picked a lead horse. In fact, she picked the horse that I just mentioned. Just to flag it, I changed this person's story to a male in the book, just for anonymity, but he actually was a female. And she picked this horse. I'll pick that horse because she's strong. I said, okay. So we brought the horse into an arena, and we did some grounding exercises with this woman. And I invited her to go into the arena and stand with the horse. And as soon as she went into the arena, the horse went apoplectic with fear and fright about where were the rest of the herd, and started running around the periphery of the arena, literally screaming whinnies. Where are you? Where are you? I'm kind of total sort of drama queen about the whole thing. And it was like, what are we going to, and this woman standing in the middle of the arena. And next thing, didn't the herd arrive? It came all the way around the property, all the way around to the field, and literally stood outside the arena looking in at her. And then she settled. And still didn't look at my client, or didn't really, just settled and started walking around and was totally chilled. And then the client decided to come out, and she said, I don't know what happened in there. And I said, well, what, how did you feel when the horse, what did this reflect back to you, that the horse needed her pals around her? What did this mean to you? And that you said, well, she said, I thought because she was so strong, she could do it on her own. Yeah, she could stand there and just be a cool, calm, collected horse, but she didn't. In fact, she just insisted that her herd show up, And I said, well, what does that mean to you? Do you feel you need to do this on your own? And yeah, and I'm not able, she said, I'm not able to do it on my own. And I said, what would it look like if you asked for support and help from your circle or your herd? I used the horse language. And then she looked at me, she said, would it be okay if I brought all these letters next week to you and opened them in the presence of the horses? So now I'm kind of, it was like I was kind of being pushed to go outside in a sense, some of my coaching work. And I said, okay, you can do this. So she arrived with a black bag of letters a week later, a big black sack of refuse sack of letters. And we sat down in a stable with the horses standing around us. And I just, again, kept my coaching hat on, said, well, what do you want to do? Or she said, I want to create 3 different piles. Ones that are repeats, put them on one pile. Ones that I need to look at again, and ones that I think are absolutely necessary. So we did that, and then we kind of culled down into those piles. And it ended up that she had, I can't remember the details, was the 2 or 3 letters left. And I said, well, what do you want to do with these? And she said, I want to bring them to my accountant to see what actually they're really saying. And the joke is, Mariana, that she was owed money from the revenue, and that's why they were writing to her. So it was just so beautiful for her to see. And it's so often as business women, we feel we have to do it alone, or as women who hold spaces for other people, we may find it difficult to get support for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it was just and it was, in a sense, it was also a learning for me to see, as you know, as coaches, we often learn as much from your clients as you. So, I mean, she just left totally drawer empty, rucksack empty, and money in her bank. Because, out of, 2 years previously, out of sort of knee-jerk reaction, she just paid the first amount that came in just to kind of get them off her back. And they realized afterwards, based on her return, that she'd overpaid.
Mary, unfortunately, not everybody has access to horses. And you know what? You and I might find ourselves in a position where we don't have our horses right near us. Have you got any thoughts for how coaches might work in a similar way with people if they can't work directly with horses?
I think one very simple one, Mariana, would be to invite you as a coach and your client to ground and become more consciously into their bodies before a session. To use maybe a minute or 2 before you launch into what's up, of feeling their feet on the ground. Imagine even that their feet are like 2 hooves. Come into your body, your bones, and your heartbeat, the 3 beats. Come into your body, come into your bones. When you come into your bones, your body, your nervous system automatically relaxes and your muscles relax. That's where horses live all the time. They live fully incarnated. We don't, because we've been conditioned to live in our heads most of the time. So we're going back and forth, and we're creating stories. So to come into your body, come into your bones, and then come into your heart. It's now seen that just by being in the presence of horses, you drop more into your heart. So if you can encourage your clients, and I see a lot of people online, but I bring that in, encourage your clients to come into their own heart. Imagine that your heart is a 3rd lung, and drop into it, drop into that lung area and give it more space, give it more oxygen. And I find that some other quality then comes into the coaching practice. Okay. And I work a lot with dreams in my coaching practice, and because I'm qualified in dream therapy. So if a person has had a dream of a horse, maybe, I don't know what the qualifications of the coaching people here, but maybe to work with that. If a client says, I had an amazing dream of a horse last week, to work with that as a coach and to ask coaching questions about it. What does that represent to you? And then as coaches, you're more than, if you want to talk to me about a love or fascination of horses, also I'm available online. Also in my book, there is an exercise at the very end of the book called Becoming Present to an Animal. And it can be, you can do that literally sitting in your apartment. And in my TED talk, there's an exercise at the very end of my TED talk about if you are living in the city and you're away from animals, of what you can do. And then just a very simple thing is encourage yourself as a coach and your clients to get out into nature.
As you say that, I was noticing the difference between our backdrop, Mary. You have this lush foliage, and I have this little concrete booth with the lights that keep going out because I'm being too still. And I'm kind of looking adoringly at your greenery. And I think there is something in that we do need to reconnect with our.
And horses and nature are reflections of what's inside our own bodies. That's really a tree represents our own connection to the earth, and in a sense our own connection to the cosmos. And the point is that midpoint between the two. The seasons reflect our own internal cycles. There's a beautiful story I read last week where they had injected redwoods with adrenaline, and they grew twice the size of the other redwoods. But within a year they died because they weren't allowed to have a winter. And that's how we need to kind of have an internal winter sometimes and let everything be stripped back to flourish again. And, so if I'm not near horses, I will, and on my retreats, I get people out into nature and actually to Celtic sites and I do different rituals at different times of the year. So it's horses, and it's not just horses. That's a good starting point, or it's a good finishing point.
It's a reconnection with bigger cycles somehow.
Get back into the sanity of nature, because as humans, we've become insane. It's an insane world, and there's so much more. And I'm sure many of you who are listening to this now or later, we are seeing so much anxiety and overwhelm in people's lives. And we have these phones that keep us kind of plugged in 24/7. So get out into nature, get out into, relish, acknowledge your own internal seasons and not be afraid of them.
And I'm thinking of, when you're talking about seasons, like my mind's going, oh gosh, it's coming up to winter. I've got horses. That means real physical slog and hard work and feeding and all of those things. But actually, gosh, you enjoy the spring at the end of it. We have to do that, and we have to recognize that things go up and down. We have cycles.
And there's cycles. Like I'm, with working with a client at the moment who's literally just stripped back to bare bone. In fact, doesn't even have a home. And it's just so beautiful to really work with helping her to soften into that and to trust. In one of my poems, it's called Autumn Equinox. The last line is, and it was literally a tree teaching me. And I said, what is a tree to say to me in my winter, wait for spring, it will come, it always does. And if we can trust the cycles and the ebbs and flows internally, but we're moving a little bit away from horses to talk about that, but it really is to even get your clients to get out into nature.
And there's something I'm hearing as well about not making assumptions, which is just general good coaching practice, not making assumptions about what's going on, and something about the importance of being mindful as well and living in the here and now.
Horses make no assumptions and they have no bias, and they just stand there. Like I've learned so much. A client came recently to me, and his back was turned to me, and he was standing in the presence of a horse, and there was nothing happening. And of course, we call it dancing on the razor's edge as equine assisted learning therapists. But it's like and yet when he turned around, there were tears were pouring down his face. But I thought nothing was happening. He's standing in front of this dumb animal, and so much was happening. And that's back to that Nancy Klein book, this time to think, this empty space that we all crave for. where we can drop into our own wisdom and into our own feeling and into our own hearts.
I would say that that's the number one
Mm.
issue with the leaders that I work with right around the world. They don't have time to think.
Mm.
And Mary, you've given us a lot to think about today, and we're coming to the end of our time together. So I'm hoping you might be able to share a poem from your book.
Well, this poem is actually in the book Saved by a Horse. It's the introduction poem. And it was written on a day where I was spinning around the place. I had 100 things to do. I had no time to stop, connecting to that time to think. And I was in this most beautiful house where we had literally a wall of a window, and the horses were in a field outside this window wall. And this horse was standing outside looking in at me. And I was running to get this. And have I forgotten anything on my shopping list and my basket and my money and my keys? And I was about to jump into the car and take off. And this horse was standing still, just looking at me. And I just knew I had to stop before I jumped into the car. And I stopped, sat in a chair that looked out into this field. And I just picked up my journal pad and my pen, and this is what I wrote. And I'd done very little editing on it. It just kind of just poured, and this was it. The poem's called Horse Wisdom, or it's called Horse Body, actually. Horse Body by Mary Berkery, from my book of poems called On Earth, but it's in my book, Saved by a Horse. Horse wisdom says to busy, speedy human mind, be here, be inside your own fetlocks and knees and body curves. Breathe, relax, graze on the now. Go inside first, then go outside. Connect first to your beating heart and smiling belly. No world to save. Breathe, relax, graze on the now. Inside first, then go outside. Connect to your beating heart and smiling belly. No world to save. And I just encourage you all to find that place inside first, and then out to all the beautiful people that you're caring for and holding sacred space for in this pivotal time in our world.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you,
I'm
Mary.
going to stop the live broadcast now, Mary, and stay on the line with me, and I'll see you on the other side.